Welcome everybody to this webinar dedicated to the role of data in business processes. Let me introduce myself. I'm Delphine Qual. I've been working for Bonitasoft for the last 6 years. I'm evangelist and community manager. And today I have the pleasure to be with Kai Winkler, director at NSI Solutions, VP of Chapter Services at 8 PM, and a huge influencer in process management based on BPM. Today we will present the applied practices and also the Bonitasoft technologies for data mining in the BPM field through a practical example of process mining in action. Just before we start, we are going to try to do it as much interactive as possible. So if you have questions, you can ask them in the panel you have in your configuration, go to webinar configuration, and we will try to answer. If we cannot answer while we are presenting, then we will answer at the end of the session. Okay, now I will let Kai start and tell you about data, what they are, why we need them, and what are their role in BPM. Hi, Kai. Thank you for being here with me.
Thanks, Delphine, and thanks everybody else for joining today's session. Yeah, so as Delphine mentioned, what we've prepared today basically is twofold. So on one hand, what we want to introduce you with is a small part of theory of data, its importance in BPM and business process management in general, and from there go forward and see how that unfolds in practical terms. So basically, how to make use of data, take advantage of it, and specifically in BPM, how to become more competitive, making the best of what we currently have in terms of data, and how to improve upon that. So yeah, making sure that we can leverage the wealth of information our business processes and platforms such as Bonitasoft generate. To begin with, I think it's no surprise for anyone as it's called, specifically those of us who are BPM professionals, BPM experts, and also starters, that there's been a very important shift in general, and in technology in particular over the last couple of, I would say, like 2 or 3 years, where we see things like micro automations, distributed services, microservices, stuff like RPA, robotics, AI, machine learning, and all that that fun stuff. Where basically, under the umbrella of digital transformation, there are a lot of advances in technology where we can make more out of our implementations and processes. Specifically in when it comes under the umbrella and the coin, right, digital transformation, when it comes to that, I would argue that on one hand, BPM is a key, and within BPM, data is the other key. So combining data and BPM, I would say that the door to digital transformation is basically open. So it's an exciting time to be in and work on BPM and make use of data. In my experience, things like digital transformation per se, it does require an important maturity or level of experiences in terms of process governance, so that we can make sure that we, on one hand, have processes in place, started automate, but also collect data, right? And the good news is that while we are doing that, we can easily leverage BPM learning curves. So BPM is an enabler from our experiences, having implemented over at NSI, as Delphine mentioned before, implementing in the region Bonitasoft, for example, that combining BPM and digital transformations, people do have a lot of success. By now, most of the companies, and I'm sure also most of the participants in today's calls, have managed to establish an important learning curve. Also, having implemented mission critical processes, our customers, for example, implemented at least 50 to 60% by now of their mission critical processes in BPM, and are ready to take the next step. And in that sense, the next step would be data science. So the evolutionary step from here forward, BPM where to go next is leveraging the BPM implementations with data science. And how to do that in practical terms, we will see in the second portion as promised in the presentation. Yeah, so also as a side note, today's webinar is based upon an article I recently published with Bonitasoft, where we basically outlined in greater detail what we summarized today, the role of data, and a couple of things in analytics, how to use data in Bonitasoft specifically and BPM in general, and also having that being an input of an upcoming book in intelligence with BPM that is being published by Future Strategy. So for whoever wants to read on or delve a bit deeper into those topics, we can share the link at the end of the presentation. Yeah, as you will see in the definitely in the next slide. Yeah, in the keyword being of what we tackled today is basically data. So in order to get there, to take the next evolutionary step in BPM, as mentioned before, that being data science in BPM, we first of all have to accomplish the 4 basic steps, right? First, make sure that we have access and we collect data. The good news is, as you most likely saw through your implementations, covering and implementing BPM processes with platforms like Bonitasoft, those processes are natural data collectors. So by default, you start collecting information about your processes regarding time, bottlenecks, workloads, and so forth without having to spend a second thought on that. So there's a lot of ground gain by simply implementing and covering most of your most important processes, mission critical processes with BPM. On the other hand, we do have to gain an understanding, and a couple of companies are still struggling with that. Understanding the data, make use of the data, and there maybe one of the first steps one can take is kind of make sure to visualize information to represent that in a graphical manner. That then makes it easier, also from a process management perspective, to make sense of the data repositories and the information we currently have. And then there forward as a third point, react based upon the data. So now that we understand, have the data, what can we do about that? And there, it's like a funnel. Even fewer companies have a lot of success nowadays and can follow practical guidelines. We also lay out in the article we published in the Bonitasoft webpage how to use that data in order to take decisions, better decisions, and feed those decisions back into the processes. And with that, reach the fourth step, where we kind of automate the loop of conclusions based upon the data back into the processes, so that the processes help us to anticipate by the means of our data. So where we can then make use of AI and machine learning, neural networks. We have seen a couple of very interesting examples that are perfectly possible with Bonitasoft, for example, of convoluted neural networks and things like where we can start combining advanced recognition of visual inputs, advanced recognitions of patterns within our data sets, and feed that back into our process and have the processes react on that. And a couple of examples we will see live very shortly. So with that, basically what you see here, what we already use and can take advantage of very easily for that is reports, dashboards, things like BAM, the business activity monitoring indicators, and BI. And from there, Devin, also, and I know it's a very boring slide, but important nonetheless, making sure that while we are going towards digital transformation, trying to reinvent ourselves and use data for that and automate as much as we can to not lose touch with not reality, but basically touch with the company strategy. So always make sure that we are kind of aligned with basically the strategy of the companies in quantifiable terms. And here the keyword is again connecting our main topic data with our processes, make things quantifiable. Here my suggestion would be, in order to define vision statements, mission statements, and value statements, let's try always to translate all those usually bland things into something more tangible, something more quantifiable, and with that feed them into a cycle of measurable goals, right? Financial goals, marketing goals, and have those become KPIs in our processes. The train of thought here, what I suggest always to develop as a roadmap in order to get there is first define variables. With those variables, craft KPIs and keep it simple crafting KPIs. We had a couple of customers that started automating their processes with KPIs and ended up with several hundreds of them, which is a bit too complex to manage effectively on a day-to-day basis. So effective KPIs, indicative KPIs, and consolidate those into a unified dashboard, a BAM dashboard, and from there apply things like BI and analytics. And analytics, the 3 or 4 analytic steps you already are most likely familiar with, like predictive analytics, descriptive analytics, and those things that help us basically to identify, is there a pattern? Can I make use of this pattern? And can I tell the process, hey, I identified a specific road, a specific outlay layout of your data in order to use that information in order to take a decision or adapt um, a specific path in the process. And here, the second point would be also not necessary to limit ourselves in our own data packages we generate from our processes or integrations to other applications, but also reach out and integrate to things like big data. Big data is very important here, and I think we are at a point where it's also easy enough to incorporate. So basically, examples here it would be to make sure that we identify things that correlate. So very good examples we see in the industry. One of those, and very well documented, by the way, is UPS. That while automating their fleet management, incorporated aspects of IoT, Internet of Things, and also big data by implementing sensors, vibration sensors on the chassis of their vehicles, where instead of going through many cycles of preventive maintenance, what they do is kind of establish a database of vibration patterns of their vehicles, and then establish tolerance thresholds where when there's a vehicle exceeding those thresholds, then and only then it gets into preventive maintenance and repair mode. And it has been proven far more effective and price effective as well than doing it completely manual. And which is a perfect example of big data being the big differentiator in big data. Um, focusing more on things that correlate than necessarily going at once after things in order to explain why that happens. And for example, in UPS, when there's a vehicle exceeding the vibration threshold, we don't necessarily why the car is breaking down, why that happens, but we know soon enough that we have to do something about it in order to save time and money. And that is a very good example. That doesn't exclude the classical analytics you see usually out, where you have a data population, you pull data samples, and from there try to explain why something happens. That still occurs, but you also go into big data sources, things like World Bank, for example. World Bank has awesome data sources available to everybody, and look for GDP in order to identify economical cycles and see how those predict possible sales numbers, and adapt your process from there to see, hey, we are going to have an uptick in the GDP. Hence, from my historical data, I can forecast that there will be a tendency for more sales volumes. In that sense, I can automatically assign more sales personnel to a commercial process. So that's perfectly possible. And we can also tail into new services. I don't know if you guys saw that a couple of weeks back, I think 2 or 3 weeks back, Google launched their new services as I think it's an extension of Google Scholar. where you have Google data sets or Google dataset search, where you can also have access to worldwide databases through a unified search interface. So big data, yeah, big news, and I think also a big differentiator in automating our processes using data. In the next slide, Delphine. Yeah, what you see here is one of those aspects, what we mentioned before, specifically machine learning. And we show that slide just for you to get an example, because that's something we already do very frequently in our processes, is leveraging certain methods. In this example, um, um, we are using, that's an example of an insurance company that asks the question, what are the predictors in my historical database of a customer being a customer that is ending up producing a claim, based upon variables I currently handle, I currently capture through my processes, things like gender, age, the type of car I drive, uh, and if a person smokes or doesn't smoke, and try to identify a certain pattern there and feed that back into the processes. So we do that also for risk management models through loan origination, and in this case for policy commercialization, so sales of car insurances, where here, for example, in this graphic, you can see that there are a couple of nodes in a decision tree model, where we can identify that, for example, in this database, most of the females don't seem to have any impact, don't produce claims. So if that is the case, and we know that from our historical data, we can create a dynamic variable that feeds back into the process saying, hey, if you already know that this requester is part of a gender that doesn't produce a claim, then we don't necessarily have to ask too many other things in a dynamic form and proceed directly with a pre-approval process. Whereas, for example, if it is turning out to be a male requester driving an Alfa Romeo, where you see one of the worst nodes of producing a claim, then eventually we can adapt the quotes, the policies, and or exclude this requester altogether. So those are examples where you can make use of data models. In this case, naive Bayes and a decision tree model, in order to feed that back into the process. Just to give you a plastic example of how that would look like in real life. Next slide. So to consolidate, what we try to achieve is basically having processes that on one end produce data. Here you see different data sets. For example, a process produces in terms of BPM, native BPM data, a BPM data repository where I store things I mentioned briefly before, timestamps, bottlenecks, responsibles, who did what, and what kind of activities we did in the forms, and store that in the data repository, complement that with business data. So basically things like if we go back to the selling insurances, for example, where you come from, demographic information, your earnings, income, your expenses, and so forth. Those are information we can complement our process information with, and also enhance that with external repositories. So that can be a credit bureau, for example, and also big data. The missing piece you won't see here in this graphic, because that is what Delphine is going to show you shortly, is basically the engine that then goes into those data bases, data repositories or marts, pulls out what we need and produces the analytics in order to feed that back into the process you see on top. And that is the portion we're going to show you in the second part of the presentation. So the idea here with those couple of slides was basically to give you an introduction of what kind of usage we make of the data. And now with a practical component with Delphine, you will see how that looks like specifically in Bonitasoft.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Kai. Um, as you said, we are going to go to a practical example and to show how we can combine data mining and BPM to bring values in a day-to-day activity for a company, as long as you are able to use it properly and to make the right actions afterwards. So what we decided to do at Bonitasoft 1 year ago is to try to find a way to use data mining, use the powerful of our engine and of our BPM platform, and use intelligence to make sure that we could help our users reaching goals and improving, being in a continuous improvement loop. So what we did, we defined a goal, a method, we built a tool, and we used a lot of data. So our solution for what we call intelligent continuous improvement, which means really making sure that in an operational environment, you can have a business process improvement. The goal we chose was to avoid delays. Why? Because if you have delays in your company, it has a big impact. Delays are very important in most of the cases. And that's, if you avoid them, you will save money, you will have satisfied customers, you might also sometimes avoid issues. So it's a common goal, and it has a real impact on your day-to-day basis and on your achievements. The method we chose was an artificial intelligence algorithm based on process performance mining. I won't go into too much details here because it is quite technical, but the fact is that this algorithm is based on operational process mining, which is collecting data and doing an intelligent algorithm to predict what could attend by looking at each step of the process and doing a comparison between the archived cases and what happened in the past and what is going to happen in the future. We built a tool based on that called Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement and based on Elasticsearch. Why? Because Elasticsearch, is a NoSQL database, which is a kind of big data database because you have crude data, and it is the kind of database that is the most the most suitable when you use this kind of process performance mining algorithm. Also, in this kind of cases, you need a lot of data, because without data, you won't have an efficient and precise algorithm. So we first started with process data, because in Bonita, you already have all those data. You have all the tasks, you have the path taken by your cases, you have the assignee, you have the duration of each task, you have the number of tasks, you can see the number of cases, you can see also errors when you have a very long time. So you have a lot of data that can help you taking decision and avoid delays. But also business data. Why? Because even if you use standard data through the process, what is also very interesting is to combine them and cross them with business data, which will be specific to the customer environment, to the business of the company, and which will give even more information to make sure you will make the right actions and improve your process. So that's how we have built BICI. Here with Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement, we are going to focus on two specific profiles, which are the developer. We call him Dave. So the Bonita developer, the one developing the processes for the company, and the operation manager, the one that is operationally managing the process. So the one which is, for example, assigning the tasks to the team, the one monitoring the business, monitoring the actions. So how it works. You can see here the Bonita platform. I don't know if everybody knows it, but you have the engine, and it is connected to applications that are viewed to users. And here's the database, the Bonita database. It can be any kind of database, MySQL, SQL Server, but here you have all the information about the processes. What we are going to do, we are going to plug Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement to Bonita database directly in production, and extract the data through data polling on an incremental way to make sure that you have an update every time and you extract data like if it was on real time. Then we store it in the Elasticsearch database to make sure that the prediction model can reuse it, do the analysis, and give predictions. Then we use those predictions um, to show them in the monitoring interface, but also to help the developer making configurations. I will show you everything in the demo in a few minutes. We can see that we have lots of domains of applications. Kai already gave you very interesting examples of how data and also data combined with BPM, with intelligence, can be used to improve the actions, to improve the way to work. Here you can see examples of processes such as, for example, the multimodal travel, where you have to travel by bus, by fly, have a flight, also book a taxi. And if your train, for example, or your bus is late, you might miss your flight, and then everything will not be okay. Also, for complex projects, we can see that making sure that the first step of your project won't be late is very important. If you have a building project where you, for example, you have to build the foundations and they are late, you could lose a lot of money, millions of euros or dollars, and having the way to predict that is really valuable. So now I am going to show you how it works with Bonitasoft and Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement. Just before we start, I chose an example which I think is very common for everybody and which is used by most of our customers, is the loan management in banking area. Why? Because when you ask for loan, you have several steps of validation, and you might have bottlenecks, and we want to avoid that in order to make sure that you will receive your loan in the right timing. Okay, so I hope you still see my screen. I'm going to the Bonita interface now. I'm logged as an administrator because I want to show you the process first. Here, if I go to the diagram, let's imagine that the IT team designed the diagram for the loan operations team, and as you can see, you have a process with lots of steps. I hope you can see that, and with different decisions depending on, for example, the amount of the loan request, depending on the acceptations, the validation or not of the manager, and so on. So you have different steps, but here, if you use Bonita administration platform, sorry, the only way to see if there is an issue is if a task is failing, which is technical. But you have no way here to know that something might be late or is already late. That's why we designed Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement for the teams. So we did it using two ways. First of all, we give the ability to the IT team to enhance and enhance the interface of the operator to make sure that they can have predictions in their dashboard. So if I go to the loan dashboard, here you see that, for example, I am an operator. I have a list of loan requests. They are at a certain step, but I don't know, really, I don't know which one might be late, which one is already late, and then I will take them the second after the first. If we use the REST APIs provided by BICI, we will help the operator because we add and we give the ability, for example, to the IT team to add a new column which will give information about the case and which will help setting priorities. If we can see that this one is already late, and here we can see, for example, that this one is urgent because it remains 1% of chance to be on time, which is almost late. Here we can see that we still have time, so it might help me choosing which one I will take first. But more than that, and to make sure that the operation manager could help his team and take the right decision, such as, for example, assigning a case to someone else if we see that there is a bottleneck somewhere, to make sure that, for example, if there is workload because it's vacation time, maybe add a step or put something on hold. We added in Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement 2 applications, and they are delivered, with the module. This is the first tab is the monitoring interface. This one will help the operation manager to monitor all the cases and make sure he can help his team doing the right task. As you can see here, we can see the on time, but also the predicted late and late tasks with the percentage of chance to reach the target, because our goal is always the SLA and the delays, to avoid delays. Those ones are already late. We know that they are late since 6 days. And those ones, interesting, are the ones that might be late. Well, those ones in 1 hour, I think they will be late. But if I take this one, for example, we still have 3% of chance to be on time. I see that I am still at the first step of the process. I started today. I did the first task today, but I just have 1 day and 22 hours to finish it. And to be honest, if I am just completing the loan application, I'm a bit late. So maybe the operation manager will take actions directly in Bonitasoft, because here you are in BC. Here in this tab, you jumped to Bonitasoft, and then you can take actions. You are at the overview of Bonitasoft. Also, I will need to monitor. We were talking about data, and at the beginning, Kai was presenting all the ways to analyze data. We talk about KPIs, about BI, and at Bonitasoft, we know that you also need that. You need to make sure that you can analyze the past data, and you need to predict what can happen to make sure you will improve your processes on a long term. So we gave 2 informations here. The first tab is about case indicators, to know which are the cases that are late or on time every month for a certain period of time. And for here we just have 1 application, but for all your processes. You see the number of cases and you see the median, for example, which is what we measure when we use our algorithm. you can see that if you look at the distribution of case duration, well, here it's not really representative, but we'll have 90% of cases that ends in 3 days. We also have indications on tasks, which is important as well. Why? Because if we have a process like this one, let me go back to this process has different paths. As you can see here, I can go here, or at this step, I can come back, I can have a validation, we have a notification. So you have different steps. If you come back here, you can see each task, the number of time they have been done, if they were present in the case, and the loop ratio, and the percentage of occurrence. For example, here you can see that the credit history has been cleared 50% of the time. So here you can take actions and say, okay, do I really need this task? And improve with your developer on the long term what you are doing and how you are going to implement your support. So you are in a continuous improvement loop.
And that is a very good example also of process mining. So yeah, making sure that you validate also real life against what you designed the process to do, because we observe that going forward, most of the times, if there's something that doesn't necessarily add value, like the 50% Delphine just showed, people just skip that. And if you identify that early enough, you can perfectly adopt and optimize your process against that. Yeah, good example.
Yeah, thank you, Kay. And exactly, that's what I wanted to explain. We still need to, we really need to make sure that we can prove well and control the theory with what's happening, what's really happening. Why? And that's what I am telling you just after this slide. But I will start with the value of Bonita continuous intelligent improvement. Really, this kind of tool will be useful in contexts where you have very long processes because you can't anticipate easily, because you have lots of steps, because you have quality indicators, but sometimes you won't have the way to improve. Then it's useful as well because you are not going to replace your employee. You are only going to augment it. What we say augment, you help him and you help his decision making with data that will be only accessible by algorithm. You are not replacing his decision, and that's really important. You keep the human decision, and he keeps the choice, the liberty to say, okay, I will do it, or I'm not going to do it. As Kai say, we give the information. You know that this task is only chosen 50% of the time. Why? Okay, we analyze it. We see that maybe it would be better to remove it. But that's your decision at the end. If you don't want to, you will not remove it. Then, something important as well. We see that working of data mining, process mining, require specific skills that are called data science skills. And those kind of profiles, are very rare. So they cost a lot. Thanks to this kind of tools, we allow companies to add these kind of competencies, resources inside without having a specific profile, which could be very difficult to find and to pay. More than that, we remain in a very operational way because we decided to build a tool that would be easily added in an existing production environment. You plug BICI to your existing Bonita platform, which makes it easy to get the information and to be able to give predictions only a couple of hours after the deployment. And also, you make sure that you work immediately on your production environment. Why? Because you won't need something like BC when you start your project. You need it when you are already in production for example, I don't know, 1 year, 2 years, and you see that you still need to improve. So today, and that's what I wanted to say, we are still working on improvements. Our research continues all the time. And that's also why we still work with lots of customers, and we need to work with customers because we need real data. We don't want to work on theoretical data. So just here, if you, I do a quick parenthesis. If customers are in the meeting and you want to collaborate with us on this research, on this innovation, tell us, because we need data. We need a lot of data. So with Bonita 1.2, we added the task execution, as you said, as you saw, sorry. But we also want to make sure, for example, that we will help taking decisions quickly by adding heat maps, including as well business data to our algorithm, to make sure that we have a better accuracy. And we are currently working again on the algorithm to make it as accurate as possible. So it's an ongoing story, and we will keep you posted as soon as we have news on BC. So I think we are both done with our presentation. I see that we already have questions. Thank you very much, everybody. So someone asking if we think that it can be applied to the public administration and public administration procedures as well. Maybe you want to answer, Guy?
Yeah, and also you feel free to add. So if I understand the question
Yeah, of
correctly,
course.
it's not necessarily process specific. So wherever you're able to put a metric behind a KPI, yeah, it's a potential candidate for analytics and continuous improvements and using everything we just saw. So that can be a process like ID renewals, registries. So basically, a public administration process would perfectly fit as well as a private company. So there aren't
Yeah,
any limitations there. So as long as you can
yeah,
establish
exactly.
data and historical data around, you can basically apply that perfectly.
Is it possible to integrate Bonitasoft with an ERP system to monitor processes and transactions of the business processes in the ERP system? Yes, it is. As long as the ERP system has opens these APIs, and we can, for example, or we can connect through connectors, database connectors, for example, or if we can connect to through REST APIs. We can integrate with ERP systems. For example, Bonita is integrated with SAP. We also have specific SAP connectors for that. If you want to monitor the processes, maybe I'm not sure I understood correctly what you want to do here.
Yeah, but most likely there are processes already in the ERP. So yeah, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. Yeah, from a strategic perspective, I would suggest that I wouldn't necessarily try to substitute and replace processes you have running in ERP with a BPM, but you certainly can extend the BPM in order to listen for data that comes from those processes. And whenever they feed into a BPM process, even better, so you add value. But the answer is yes. And also, in addition to that, because we had a couple of examples to that, and Delphine can speak in more detail to the exact examples, is there are also a couple of implementations where there's the ERP, and the ERP is kind of a black box, and not necessarily because it's impossible to integrate. It's just maybe an old system, or it's so expensive to do, or to find researchers to do that in a timely fashion, that it may be also feasible to look at the RPA extensions that Bonita brings with. So yeah, that is a possibility as well, to extend robotics and use the robotics in order to get into the ERP, get the data, and listen for the patterns. But definitely, yes, it's just a matter of drafting it out, making sure that you don't replicate things you already have in order to not have necessary redundancy. But you can perfectly integrate also business intelligence from the BPM into the ERP.
Okay, we had a question as well. Please explain what a time box process is. A process where you have to reach steps in a certain time. For example, this kind of processes I showed you, from my experience, and for example, one of our customers is working with it like that. They had an SLA to to do the whole process in 4 days, which means that you have to perform tasks within a certain time. And some tasks can be done very quickly, but sometimes if they are not done, for example, in a half a day, you can imagine that you will have an escalation process in your process, and you can define that. You can think about it and say, okay, we need to do this task in 2 days. Then you go to next steps. If it's not done in 2 days, escalation process to another team or a manager, or I don't know what.
Mm. And the question is actually very good in the sense that if people look at the data and analytics, a couple of things we established at the beginning of the presentation, the possibilities of course are endless, but usually time and the measurement of time is a perfect way to start, and the best, and also the more um, integral an intuitive way to start. So if you measure time in the process, it's always a good bet to begin with that. And response times and so forth, it's a no-brainer. You have that information there, and you can measure against it, as Delphi mentioned. The advantage would be, and you can do that even without any analytics, right? You just do it as you always did. You say you want the stuff done by maximum 1 or 2 days, and if that doesn't happen, send out an alert. So that's very basic, and you can do that perfectly with Bonitasoft as is right now. Yeah, the advantages you can gain bringing into analytics into the whole thing is the example that Finn showed that while you still have your ongoing goal of complying with something specific within 2 days, you can then look at the probabilities and say, well, given my historical data over the last 2 or 3 4 years, your current case you're looking at has only 40% of making it, and then act on that, because that's far more precise in order to accomplish the result than doing it the old-fashioned way. Kind of analogic to the example of UPS that looks at the vibration patterns instead of going to the preventive maintenance all the time. So it's more precise.
Next question. Do you have a plan to allow an ERP vendor access to BICI to work on defining the data links? It depends on what you call an ERP vendor. To be honest, for the time being, I don't know. I can't answer your question. I think I will ask the question and I'll come back to you because as of today, I don't see any plan for the time being. BC is only plugged with Bonita, and you can use Kibana to show your analysis and your data, but that's all.
But yeah, again, look at it maybe from a user perspective. So whoever uses Bonitasoft, it can be also the ERP vendor. So yeah, it doesn't Bonitasoft doesn't necessarily care who access the BC model, right? So if that is a BC the ERP vendor, there's no restriction. Whoever assumes the role of the BC administrator can perfectly have access and connect the data points. So that can be from the end user perspective or from the ERP vendor. So there's no technical restriction for that, if that was a question. Links. So that's one thing interesting. Yeah, do you have the answer for that? Yeah, the latest. And maybe two answers to the question. Yeah, that's if Bonita is able to process unstructured data. So, and maybe my general answer, and then you can go into specifics with Bonitasoft, Delphine. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. In general terms, that we have seen a couple of examples where processes, BPM processes, reach into unstructured data specifically for customer attendance cases. So, for example, if you have a process for customer services where you want to listen into things like semantic analytics and sentiment analytics in Twitter, for example, and use the Twitter API key, go there, download basically the packages of data that are partially structured, and do some analytics from there. That's something we have seen. And in general terms, I would say the answer is yes. Specifically, I would need to know if there's a plugin already for that in BC, which I don't know. Delphine, do you know by any chance?
Well, actually, BC is processing unstructured data for sure.
Cool. Mm.
To execute processes, the motor, the engine will only use a how you say relational database, so like a MySQL, MS SQL Server, Oracle, and so on. But for external storage, so external data storage, so business data, for example, yes, you can.
Yeah, no, perfectly. You can also upload a CSV file for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then can I feed BC with prepared data from a legacy system so that I can check?
Mm-hmm. I think you answered that already. Yeah, so that's basically integrating BC to external data, and there's one slide. And once we share that, you can see that specifically. But there's one slide dedicated to that, where you can make use of the BC information from the processes, but also extend that to external applications. Yeah. So yes, the answer is that. So for example, if you want to feed in an additional application like a transactional system, in addition to the process, you can combine those two data sources.
I think we are done for today. Thank you very much for your questions. If you have more questions, feel free to ask us, Kay or myself. Let me come back to the first slide so that you have our contacts. And also, if you have questions, you can ask them on our community website in the forum section, and we will be really happy to help you. Thank you very much, Kai, for your presentation. It's always a pleasure to work with you.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.